The year was 2347, and humanity had finally done what scientists had dreamed about for centuries. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that most people did not even know existed, a team of engineers and physicists had cracked the code of faster-than-light communication. For decades, they had been listening to signals from distant stars, intercepting messages between alien civilizations, who did not know or did not care that a small blue planet was eavesdropping on their conversations. Now it was time to speak. Admiral Nathan Cole stood in the transmission center, with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a tall man in his early 60s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what humanity could do. Behind him, dozens of technicians worked at their stations, running final checks on equipment that would send humanity's voice across the galaxy for the first time. "Signal integrity is holding steady," said Laura Bennett, the communications director. She was younger than Cole by 20 years, but had earned her position through brilliance and determination. Her fingers moved across the holographic display in front of her as she verified each system one more time. "We are ready to transmit on your order, Admiral," Cole nodded slowly. The message they were about to send had been crafted by linguists, diplomats, scientists, and philosophers from every nation on Earth. It contained greetings in 1,000 human languages. It included mathematical proofs to demonstrate intelligence. It carried samples of music and art and literature. Most importantly, it carried a simple request for peaceful contact with the Galactic Council, the coalition of 12 ancient species who had governed the known universe for over 50,000 years. "Send it," Cole said. Laura pressed the activation sequence, and a beam of encoded light shot upward through the mountain, through the atmosphere, and into the darkness of space. It would reach the nearest Council relay station in approximately 4 hours. After that, humanity would simply have to wait. Those 4 hours felt like 4 years. Cole refused to leave the command center. He drank coffee that grew cold in his hands and watched the displays as if staring at them. Hard enough might make a response appear faster. Laura stayed with him, along with Colonel Daniel Hughes, the facility's security commander, and a rotating team of specialists who monitored every frequency for any sign of acknowledgement. The response came 3 days later. Laura was the first to detect it. She had been running on minimal sleep and maximum caffeine when her console began flashing with incoming data. "Admiral," she called out, her voice cracking slightly. "We have a response from the Council relay station." Cole was at her side in seconds. "Put it on the main display." The message that appeared was not what any of them had expected. It was short, clinical, and utterly dismissive. The translation software they had developed over the years converted the alien text into English, and Cole read it aloud so that everyone in the room could hear. "Species detected in Sector 7G, designation human, has been assessed and classified as Category 7. Category 7 species are defined as pre-industrial, non-sentient, and ineligible for contact or recognition by the Galactic Council. The species designated human is hereby instructed to cease all transmissions immediately. Failure to comply will result in corrective measures. This communication does not constitute acknowledgement of sentience or sapience. End of message." Silence filled the command center. Laura stared at her display as if the words might change if she looked at them long enough. Colonel Hughes let out a slow breath through his teeth. "They think we are animals," he said quietly. "They have been watching us for God knows how long, and they decided we do not qualify as intelligent life." Cole read the message again, then a third time. Each reading made his jaw tighten a little more. Pre-industrial, non-sentient. The words were not just wrong. They were insulting in a way that felt deeply personal. Humanity had split the atom. Humanity had walked on the moon and Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Humanity had cured diseases that once killed millions and built machines that could think and create. And these aliens, these ancient species who claimed to govern the galaxy, had looked at all of that and seen nothing but primitive animals making noise. "We send another message," Cole said finally. "We show them everything. Every scientific achievement, every work of art, every philosophical text. We prove to them that we are exactly what we say we are." The second transmission was larger than the first by orders of magnitude. It contained the complete works of Einstein and Newton and Hawking. It included the music of Bach and Mozart and every composer who had ever put notes to paper. It carried the paintings of the great masters and the writings of poets and novelists from every culture and every era. It held the history of human civilization from the first cave paintings to the construction of the Mars colonies. They sent everything humanity had ever created or discovered, compressed into a single massive data package that took nearly 6 hours to transmit. Then they waited again. The Council's second response arrived 12 days later. It was even shorter than the first. The species-designated human has failed to comply with instructions to cease transmissions. Additionally, species has transmitted data that demonstrates primitive mimicry of higher cognitive functions, but does not constitute evidence of true sentience. Mimicry is a common survival trait among non-sentient species and is not grounds for reclassification. This is a final warning. Cease all transmissions immediately. Corrective measures will be authorized if non-compliance continues. This communication does not constitute acknowledgement of sentience or sapience. End of message. Laura Bennett looked at her commanding officer. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling slightly as she held the translated message. "Sir," she said softly, "what do we do now?" Cole did not answer immediately. He walked to the observation window that looked out over the underground facility, past the rows of equipment and the teams of specialists, to a small screen that showed a live feed of the night sky above the mountain. Somewhere out there, impossibly far away, beings who had existed for tens of thousands of years had looked at humanity and seen nothing worth saving. "That was not a warning," he said finally. "That was a threat. They have already decided what we are, and nothing we say will change their minds." "Then what do we do?" Laura asked again. Admiral Nathan Cole turned away from the stars and faced his team. His expression had changed. The shock and hurt were gone, replaced by something harder and colder. "We prepare," he said. "We prepare for the possibility that peaceful contact is no longer an option. We prepare for the possibility that these corrective measures they mentioned are exactly what they sound like." He paused and looked at each face in the room. "We prepare for war." The order went out that night to every human settlement in the solar system. Something was coming. Something that saw humanity as nothing more than an infestation to be cleaned. And humanity, for the first time in its long and bloody history, would have to stand together or fall alone. The Galactic Council had made its decision. Now it was time for humanity to make its own. 6 months passed after the Council's final warning, and humanity used every single day. The governments of Earth had spent centuries fighting each other over land and resources and ideology. But the threat of extinction has a way of putting old disagreements into perspective. Within weeks of Admiral Cole's order, the United Defense Command became the single most powerful organization in human history. With every nation contributing soldiers and scientists and engineers to the cause, they built ships. Hundreds of them at first, then thousands. Shipyards on Earth worked around the clock, while new facilities were constructed on Luna and Mars and in the asteroid belt. The designs were based on everything humanity had learned from decades of intercepting alien communications and studying the occasional piece of wreckage that drifted into the solar system. Human engineers took alien concepts and made them better, faster, more efficient. It was what humans had always done. They saw something that worked, and they improved it. Colonel Daniel Hughes oversaw the military preparations from a command center on Luna. He had aged 10 years in the past 6 months, his hair turning white and lines deepening around his eyes. But his voice remained steady, and his mind remained sharp as he coordinated the largest military buildup in human history. We have 1,200 combat vessels. Operational, he reported to Admiral Cole during their weekly briefing. Another 800 will be ready within the next 2 months. Ground forces on Earth have been reorganized into rapid response units. Every colony has been fortified. Cole nodded, but his expression remained grim. "It will not be enough. You know that?" "I know," Hughes admitted, "but it is what we have." Far from Earth, on the frozen moon of Europa, another kind of work was being done. Commander Sophie Grant led the research division at a facility buried beneath kilometers of ice. She was a small woman, with dark hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that never seemed to stop analyzing everything around her. Before the crisis, she had been one of the leading xenarchaeologists on Earth, studying ancient alien artifacts found scattered across the solar system. Now her work had taken on a new and desperate urgency. Her team had made a discovery 3 months ago that changed everything. Deep beneath Europa's ice, in a cavern that should not have existed, they found the wreckage of a starship. But this was not like any alien vessel humanity had ever encountered. The technology was different, more advanced. The design principles were completely foreign, unlike anything from the 12 species of the Galactic Council. This ship predates the Council, Sophie explained to the gathered admirals during a holographic conference. Her image flickered slightly due to the distance, but her excitement was clear. Based on our analysis, it crashed here approximately 70,000 years ago. That is 20,000 years before the Council even existed. Admiral Cole leaned forward in his chair. What can you tell us about the species that built it? Very little so far. We have found no remains and no clear identifying markers. But we have found something else. Sophie manipulated her display and a schematic appeared, showing a device of elegant and terrifying complexity. A weapon. Or at least we think it is a weapon. Our physicists have been studying it for weeks, and they believe it manipulates the fabric of space and time itself. Can we use it? Cole asked. We do not fully understand how it works yet. The principles are beyond anything in human science. But we are making progress. Dr. Kevin Park believes we can build a partial version within a few months. We may not have a few months, Cole said quietly. He was right. The Vethrani warship dropped out of hyperspace near Saturn 3 weeks later. It was called the Eternal Judgment, and it was the largest vessel humanity had ever seen. 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. It hung in space like a predator studying its prey. The Vethrani were the Council's enforcers, reptilian species with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that showed no mercy. In 40,000 years of warfare, they had never known defeat. They had burned 100 worlds to ash and felt nothing but satisfaction. Hi. Commander Kaseth stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the tiny blue planet in the distance. Earth. Home to the species that had dared to ignore the Council's warnings. He had reviewed the intelligence reports during the journey and found them almost amusing. These humans had built ships and weapons and thought themselves prepared for war. They did not understand what war truly meant. He opened a communication channel to all human frequencies. His translators would ensure every one of these creatures understood his words. Species designation human, he announced, his voice cold and sharp. Your existence has been deemed a contamination to this sector of the galaxy. You have been assessed and found unworthy of the gift of life. You will be cleansed from this system, and all record of your existence will be erased. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is simply what will happen. You have 1 hour to make peace with whatever primitive gods you worship. On Luna, Admiral Cole listened to the message with a face carved from stone. Around him, his staff worked frantically, pulling up tactical displays and fleet positions and weapons readiness reports. None of the numbers were good. Get me a channel to that ship, Cole ordered. Laura Bennett's fingers flew across her console. Channel open, sir? Cole took a breath and spoke clearly. This is Admiral Nathan Cole of Earth's United Defense Command. We have done nothing to threaten the Galactic Council. We have asked only for recognition and peaceful contact. We are not your enemies. We do not wish to fight. Keseth's response came quickly, dripping with contempt. You ask for what you have not earned. Primitives do not negotiate with their betters. You are not our enemies because enemies require equality. You are simply an infestation that must be removed. The channel closed. Laura looked at Cole with fear in her eyes. Sir, our fleet is no match for that ship. The projections show that even with everything we have built, we cannot stop a vessel of that size and power. I know, Cole said. He turned to Hughes. Get me Commander Grant on Europa. We are out of time to be careful." The message reached Sophie Grant 17 minutes later. She read it twice, then gathered her team in the main laboratory. Dr. Kevin Park was already there, along with the other scientists and engineers who had been working on the alien weapon. "We have 43 minutes," Sophie told them. "That is how long until that warship begins its attack on Earth." Kevin shook his head. "The device is not ready. It will not be stable. We do not even know if it will work at the scale we need." Sophie looked at the weapon sitting in the center of the lab, small and innocent looking, despite the power it contained. "Then we find out. Because if we do not try, everyone we have ever known or loved will be dead in less than an hour." She began giving orders, and her team moved to obey. Humanity's last hope was a device built by a species that had vanished 70,000 years ago. Operated by people who barely understood how it worked. It was desperate. It was reckless. It was the most human thing imaginable, and it was all they had. The device sat on a reinforced platform in the center of the laboratory. It's no larger than a refrigerator, but containing power that Sophie Grant and her team could barely comprehend. They had spent months studying the alien weapon, running simulations and tests and calculations that pushed human science to its absolute limits. Now they had 43 minutes to make it work or watch everything they loved burn. Dr. Kevin Park worked with hands that refused to stay steady. He was a thin man with glasses that kept sliding down his nose, and a mind that could solve equations most people could not even read. Right now, that mind was racing through possibilities and problems faster than he could speak them aloud. "The containment field is fluctuating," he reported. "If we activate the device at full power, it might tear itself apart before it does anything useful." Sophie moved to his station and studied the readings. "What if we reduce the output? Use less power? Then the effective range drops significantly. We would need to be within 300 kilometers of that warship for it to work." 300 kilometers, Sophie repeated. She thought about the eternal judgment, about its sensors and weapons, and the thousands of Vethrani warriors aboard. Getting that close would be almost impossible. Almost. We need a ship. Something small and fast, with the best stealth systems we have. She opened a channel to Admiral Cole on Luna and explained the situation in quick, precise sentences. There was no time for long discussions or careful planning. Every second that passed brought humanity closer to extinction. Cole listened without interrupting. When Sophie finished, he was silent for a moment, then spoke. "The Quiet Dawn. It is an experimental vessel designed for reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. The stealth systems can bend light and radiation around the hull. To most sensors, it would be completely invisible. Can it get within 300 kilometers of the Vethrani ship?" "It will have to," Cole said. "I will contact the crew and have them ready for launch within the hour." "We do not have an hour," Sophie reminded him. "Then they will be ready in 20 minutes. The Quiet Dawn was docked at a small facility on Ganymede, one of Jupiter's largest moons. It was a sleek vessel, painted in colors that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of light. The crew consisted of 12 volunteers who had trained for months in the most dangerous kind of missions. Their captain was a man named Marcus Webb. Marcus was 34 years old, with broad shoulders and a calm voice that never seemed to waver no matter how bad things got. He had been a pilot since he was old enough to fly, working his way up from cargo ships to military fighters to the most advanced experimental craft humanity had ever built. When the call came from Admiral Cole, he gathered his crew in the briefing room and told them the truth. "You're being asked to carry a weapon we do not fully understand into the heart of an enemy fleet that outguns us by a factor of about 1,000,000 to 1, he said. "The scientists think it will work. They are not certain. If it does not work, we will probably die. If it does work, there is still a good chance we will die." He paused and looked at each face in the room. "Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so without shame. This is not an order. This is a request." No one moved. No one spoke. After a long moment, Marcus nodded slowly. "Then let us go save the world. Die." The weapon arrived from Europa via emergency transport, packed in a container that hummed with barely contained energy. Sophie Grant came with it, refusing to stay behind, while others risked their lives with technology she understood better than anyone. Kevin Park objected, but she ignored him. Some things were more important than safety. They loaded the device into the quiet Dawn's cargo bay and secured it with every stabilizer they could find. Sophie ran final checks while the crew prepared for launch. Marcus came to stand beside her, watching the readings on her display. "Will it work?" he asked quietly. Sophie hesitated. Lying would be easy, but this man deserved the truth. "I do not know. The original weapon was built by a species that disappeared 70,000 years ago. We have spent months trying to understand principles of physics that should not be possible. What we built is based on incomplete data and educated guesses." She looked up at him. "But it is our best chance. Our only chance." Marcus nodded. "Good enough for me." The quiet Dawn launched from Ganymede and slipped into the darkness of space. Its stealth systems activated immediately, wrapping the ship in a cocoon of bent light and redirected energy. To the sensors of the Eternal Judgment. To the eyes of High Commander Keseth and his crew, it simply did not exist. Inside the Vethrani warship, Keseth watched the countdown with satisfaction. 15 minutes remained before he would give the order to begin the cleansing. His weapons officers had already selected their targets. The major population centers would be destroyed first, then the military installations, then the colonies on the inner planets. Finally, every trace of human existence would be burned away until nothing remained. But empty rock and ash, it was not cruelty. Keseth did not hate these humans. He simply did not think about them at all. They were pests, nothing more. Removing them was a duty, not a pleasure. The council had given its orders, and he would carry them out as he had carried out 100. Similar orders across 40,000 years of service. His sensors showed no threats. The human fleet was gathered near their home world, pathetically small and hopelessly outmatched. A few of their ships had moved into defensive positions around their colonies, but none had approached the Eternal Judgment. They were afraid. They understood what was coming, and they could do nothing to stop it. He did not see the quiet Dawn drifting closer through the void. Neither did his sensor operators, or his tactical officers, or any of the sophisticated detection systems that had tracked enemies across 1,000 battlefields. The human ship moved like a ghost, silent and invisible, carrying death in its cargo bay. On the bridge of the quiet Dawn, Marcus Webb watched his display as the distance counter slowly decreased. 400 kilometers. 350. 325. Stealth systems holding, reported his first officer, a woman named Claire Dawson. "No indication they have detected us." "Weapon status?" Marcus asked. Sophie checked her readings from the cargo bay. "Stable for now. Containment field is fluctuating, but within acceptable parameters." 300 kilometers. They were in range. Marcus opened a channel to Admiral Cole. "Quiet Dawn to Luna Command. We are in position. Awaiting authorization to deploy." Cole's voice came back immediately, heavy with the weight of what he was about to order. "Authorization granted. May God have mercy on us all." Marcus looked at Sophie. She looked back at him and gave a small nod. He reached for the activation controls. In the cargo bay, the ancient weapon began to hum, drawing power from sources that human science could not explain, preparing to do something that should have been impossible: the countdown on the Eternal Judgment reached 14 minutes. It would never reach 0. Marcus Webb pressed the activation sequence, and the universe held its breath in the cargo bay of the quiet. Dawn, the ancient weapon, came alive. Sophie Grant watched her monitors as energy readings spiked beyond anything their instruments could properly measure. The device hummed louder, then louder still, vibrating at frequencies that seemed to pass through solid matter and into something deeper. Light bent around the containment field in ways that hurt to look at. Reality itself seemed to twist and stretch, like fabric being pulled too tight. Then silence. Not the ordinary silence of space, but something more profound, something absolute. Sophie felt it in her bones, a moment of perfect stillness that lasted less than a heartbeat, but seemed to stretch into eternity. The screens in front of her flickered and went dark. The lights in the cargo bay dimmed to almost nothing. For one terrible second, she thought the weapon had failed, had torn itself apart and taken them with it. Then the power came back. The screens lit up. The readings stabilized, and the eternal judgment was gone. Marcus stared at his tactical display, waiting for the massive red signature of the Vethrani warship to reappear. It did not. He ran a full sensor sweep, then another, then a third. Nothing. The space where the 3-kilometer warship had been floating just moments ago was completely empty. Confirmed, Claire Dawson said, her voice barely above a whisper. The target has been eliminated. No debris, no energy residue, no escape pods. She turned to look at Marcus with wide eyes. It has just gone, like it was never there. Sophie emerged from the cargo bay on unsteady legs. She had seen the readings. She understood what had happened, at least in theory. The weapon had done exactly what the ancient aliens had designed it to do. It had reached out across 300 kilometers of space and simply removed the eternal judgment from existence. Not destroyed. Not transported, removed, erased. The Vethrani ship and everyone aboard had been pushed out of reality itself, sent somewhere that human language did not have words for. 40,000 Vethrani warriors. Gone in an instant. Silent and complete. Is it over? Marcus asked. Sophie shook her head slowly. This part is over. What comes next might be worse. On Luna, Admiral Nathan Cole watched his displays with an expression that mixed relief and horror in equal measure. Laura Bennett stood beside him, tears streaming down her face as she confirmed what the sensors were telling them. The Vethrani vessel has vanished, she reported. Captain Webb and his crew are intact. They are requesting permission to return to base. Permission granted, Cole said quietly. He continued staring at the empty space where the eternal judgment had been. 40,000 lives. He knew they had been enemies. He knew they had come to exterminate humanity without mercy or hesitation. But 40,000 thinking beings had just ceased to exist because of an order he gave. That weight would stay with him forever. Sir, Laura said carefully. What do we do now? Cole turned away from the display. Now we send a message. The Council needs to understand what happened here. They need to understand that humanity is not what they thought we were. The message was composed over the next several hours. Cole worked on it personally, choosing each word with care. When it was finished, he read it aloud to his senior staff before authorizing transmission. To the Galactic Council, your warship Eternal Judgment entered human space with declared hostile intent. Its commander announced his intention to exterminate our species without negotiation or mercy. In defense of our people and our right to exist, we were forced to respond. The Eternal Judgment no longer exists. This communication serves as formal notice that any further acts of aggression against Earth or its territories will be met with immediate and absolute. We did not choose this conflict. We asked repeatedly for peaceful contact and recognition. We were denied and threatened with extinction. We will not apologize for surviving. Humanity requests one final time the opportunity for peaceful recognition and diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council. The alternative has been demonstrated. We hope you will choose wisely. The message was sent. Then humanity waited. Days passed, then weeks. The human fleet remained on high alert, watching for any sign of another attack. Scientists studied the data from the weapon's activation, trying to understand exactly what had happened and whether it could be repeated. Sophie Grant returned to Europa to continue her research. Haunted by questions about the ancient species that had built such terrible technology and then vanished from the universe. On Earth, life slowly began to return to something like normal. People went back to their jobs and their families. Children returned to schools. The immediate terror of extinction faded into a lingering anxiety that colored everything, but did not stop the business of living. Humans had always been good at adapting. It was perhaps their greatest strength. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Eternal Judgment, the Council's response finally arrived. It came not as a private transmission to the Unit Defense Command, but as a broadcast on all frequencies. Loud enough for every human being on every world to hear. Someone on the council wanted to make sure this message was received by everyone. Laura Bennett pulled up the translation and displayed it on the main screen. Cole read it with his staff gathered around him, their faces tense with anticipation. Species designation human. Your status has been reviewed in light of recent events. The Galactic Council has determined that previous classifications may have been made in error. A delegation will arrive at the edge of your system in 10 standard cycles to discuss terms of formal recognition and potential membership in the Council. This delegation will consist of representatives from 3 member species and will travel under diplomatic protection. Violence against Council representatives will not be tolerated and will result in immediate termination of negotiations. Acknowledge receipt of this message and confirm your willingness to participate in discussions. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Laura let out a laugh that was half relief and half disbelief. "They are scared," she said. "The great Galactic Council that has ruled the universe for 50,000 years is actually scared of us." Colonel Hughes shook his head. "They should be. We made their biggest warship disappear without a trace, and they have no idea how we did it. For all they know, we could do the same thing to their homeworlds." Cole did not share their relief. His expression remained serious as he studied the message again. "They are scared," he agreed, "and that makes them dangerous. Scared people do desperate things. Scared civilizations do worse." He turned to face his staff. "This is not a victory. This is an opportunity. We have their attention now. What we do with it will determine whether humanity survives the next century or becomes another forgotten species in the Council's archives." He began composing a response, accepting the Council's offer and confirming humanity's willingness to meet. But even as he wrote the words of peace and cooperation, part of his mind was already planning for the possibility that peace would not be enough. The Galactic Council had ignored humanity's message. They had sent a warship to wipe out an entire species without hesitation or remorse. One defeat would not change who they were. It would only make them more careful. The real battle was just beginning. The Council delegation arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system in 3 elegant vessels that gleamed like polished silver against the darkness of space. They were not warships. They carried no visible weapons. But everyone watching understood that this was a test. The Council wanted to see how humanity would respond to their presence. Admiral Cole had prepared carefully. A neutral meeting station had been constructed in the asteroid belt, built by human engineers in less than 2 weeks. It was a feat of engineering that would have been impossible just a few years ago. The speed of its construction was meant to send a message of its own. Humanity could build. Humanity could adapt. Humanity was not the primitive species the Council had dismissed so easily. The human delegation was small but carefully chosen. Admiral Cole would represent the military. Ambassador Patricia Dunn would handle the diplomatic negotiations. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years resolving conflicts between nations on Earth, talking down dictators and brokering peace in places where peace seemed impossible. Now she would attempt something far more difficult. Sophie Grant came as well. Her knowledge of the ancient technology and the species that had created it might prove valuable. And there was another reason Cole wanted her there. The Council needed to understand that humanity's weapon was not a lucky accident. It was the result of intelligence and determination, and the kind of stubborn refusal to die that had carried humans through ice ages and plagues and wars. The lead diplomat from the Council was a being called Seneth. She belonged to a species called the Karai, one of the founding races that had created the Council 50,000 years ago. She was tall and slender, with skin that shifted colors depending on her emotions. When she stepped off her vessel and into the meeting station, her skin was a deep, cautious blue. "You were the ones who destroyed the eternal judgment," she said. It was not a question. Patricia Dunn stepped forward and inclined her head in greeting. "We are the ones who defended ourselves against an unprovoked attack. The eternal judgment came to our system with the stated intention of exterminating our species. We responded as any intelligent beings would respond when faced with annihilation." Seneth's skin flickered through several shades of purple. 40,000 Vetherani died. They were warriors and officers and crew members with families and histories. They are simply gone now, erased from existence. We regret the loss of life, Patricia said carefully. But we did not start this conflict. We asked for peaceful contact. We were told we were not intelligent enough to deserve recognition. We were told we would be cleansed like an infestation. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. We will not apologize for refusing to die. The negotiations lasted for 3 days. Seneth and her fellow delegates asked endless questions about human history and culture and technology. They seemed particularly interested in the weapon that had destroyed the Eternal Judgment. How had humanity discovered it? How did it work? Could it be used again? Sophie answered what she could without revealing too much. She explained about the wreckage on Europa and the ancient species that had built it. She watched Sanit's skin change colors when she mentioned the architects, a name Sophie had found in the alien databanks. You know that name, Sophie said. You know who they were? Seneth was silent for a long moment. Her skin had faded to a pale gray that suggested something like fear. The architects were a species that existed before the Council. They were powerful beyond measure. They waged war against the races that would eventually form our alliance. She paused. They nearly won. It took everything we had to defeat them. But you did not defeat them, Sophie said quietly. They disappeared. The records we found suggest they chose to leave rather than continue fighting. That is one interpretation. What happened to them? Seneth did not answer. Her skin remained that pale, fearful gray. On the 3rd day, the negotiations reached their critical point. Patricia Dunn sat across from Seneth and the other delegates and laid out humanity's position in clear, simple terms. We are not asking for special treatment. We are not asking for power or territory or influence. We are asking for what should have been given from the beginning. Recognition. A seat at the table. The right to exist as equals among the species of this galaxy. Seneth's skin shifted through blues and purples and finally settled on a color none of the humans had seen before. A soft golden glow that seemed to radiate warmth. The Council will need time to consider your request. This is not a decision that can be made quickly. We understand, Patricia said. But understand this as well. We are not going anywhere. We are not the primitive species you thought we were. We found something in the ruins of your ancient war, something you hoped would never be found again. We rebuilt it. We used it. And we can use it again if necessary. She leaned forward slightly. We would prefer peace. We would prefer cooperation and friendship and mutual respect. But we will not accept anything less than equality. That is not negotiable. The delegation departed the next day. Seneth promised that the Council would send their decision within 1 standard year. It was faster than anyone expected. The Council had governed the galaxy for 50,000 years and rarely made decisions quickly. The fact that they were willing to move so fast told Cole and his team everything they needed to know. The decision came 6 months later. Humanity was granted full recognition and membership in the Galactic Council, the first new species admitted in 12,000 years. The vote had not been unanimous. The Vithrani had opposed it with every argument and threat they could muster. But in the end, fear and practicality won over pride and revenge. Admiral Cole retired shortly after the announcement. He moved to a small house on the coast of Maine, where the sound of waves reminded him of simpler times. He had done what was necessary to save his species. Now he wanted to rest. Sophie Grant took over as director of a new division dedicated to studying the architects and searching for other secrets they might have left behind. There was so much they still did not understand. The weapon on Europa was just the beginning. Somewhere out there were answers to questions humanity had not even thought to ask yet, Captain. Marcus Webb was promoted to commander and given charge of the First Contact Fleet, a squadron of ships designed to seek out other forgotten species in the far corners of the galaxy. Humanity had been alone and afraid when the Council came for them. Marcus was determined that no other species would face that same loneliness. And on the walls of the Council chamber, beside the symbols of the 12 ancient species that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years, a new emblem took its place. It was simple. a pale blue dot circled by a thin silver ring. Earth, humanity. The species that had been ignored and dismissed and sentenced to death. The species that had answered with silence and changed the galaxy. Forever, Patricia Dunn gave a speech. On the day humanity officially joined the Council, she spoke of hope and cooperation and the possibility of a future where all intelligent beings could live together in peace. But she also spoke of the lesson humanity had learned in those dark months when extinction seemed certain. "We came to you with open hands," she said, looking at the assembled delegates from a dozen worlds. "You answered with weapons. We survived not because we were stronger or more advanced, but because we refused to give up. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human. We endure. We adapt. We find a way." She paused, and her eyes swept across the chamber. "We hope we will never need to use our weapon again. We hope that this council will be a place of wisdom and justice and equality. But if anyone ever again mistakes our desire for peace as weakness, they will learn the same lesson the Vethrani learned." She smiled, but there was something fierce beneath it. "We are humanity, and we are not going anywhere."